The grand hall of Tenebrous Castle blazed with unholy light. Chandeliers wrought from captured starlight hung from vaulted ceilings, their glow reflecting off polished obsidian floors. Demon nobility from across the realm filled the space, their laughter echoing against ancient stone walls. Tonight marked the 500th anniversary of Lord Veilstrom's ascension to power, and every creature of significance had been summoned to attend. Veilstrom himself stood near the throne dais, surrounded by fawning courtiers. His appearance struck that careful balance between magnificent and terrifying that defined his rule. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore black armor that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. His silver hair fell past his shoulders, framing a face too sharp to be human, too controlled to be merely monstrous. Eyes the color of molten amber swept across the assembled guests, noting everything, forgetting nothing. The ball had been underway for an hour. Musicians played instruments that hummed with dark magic, their melodies weaving through conversations like silk thread. Servants circulated with trays of delicacies from conquered lands. Everything proceeded according to plan, with one notable exception. Lady Seraphine had not yet arrived. Veilstrom's jaw tightened imperceptibly. As his chief strategist and most trusted advisor, Seraphine's absence was both conspicuous and inexcusable. He had specifically commanded her attendance. More than that, he had requested she arrive early to help receive guests, an honor he had extended to no one else. Her empty place at his side had not gone unnoticed by the assembled nobles, and their speculative whispers grated on his nerves. "My lord," Duke Malphaz sidled closer, his reptilian features arranged in what passed for concern. "Perhaps the lady has taken ill. It would be most unlike her to simply disregard your summons." Veilstrom's expression remained neutral, though his fingers tightened slightly on the goblet he held. "Lady Seraphine's whereabouts are her own concern until they become mine." The Duke bowed and retreated, but the damage was done. Others had heard the exchange. By morning, speculation about Seraphine's absence would have spawned a dozen rumors, each more elaborate than the last. Some would whisper of a falling out between the demon lord and his advisor. Others might suggest she had finally overstepped, earning his fatal displeasure. A few of the more imaginative would invent romantic entanglements or political conspiracies. All of it would be tiresome to dispel. The music shifted to a waltz. Couples took to the floor, their movements elegant and practiced. Veilstrom maintained his position, engaging in the tedious small talk that came with rulership. He listened to reports of border skirmishes, nodded at accounts of successful harvests in the southern territories, and accepted congratulations on his reign with appropriate gravity. But his attention kept drifting to the main entrance. Seraphine had served at his side for nearly 2 centuries. She had come to him as a young demoness with more ambition than sense, challenging his strategies in open court. Most would have been executed for such audacity. Instead, Veilstrom had tested her, pitting his tactics against hers in a series of war games. When she won 3 out of 5 scenarios, he had offered her a position. She had never disappointed him since. Her mind worked in ways that complemented his own, seeing angles he might miss, questioning assumptions he might take for granted. More than that, she possessed an integrity rare among demon nobility. She did not scheme for personal advancement or plot against rivals. She simply did her work with a competence that made his rules stronger. Which made her unexplained absence all the more troubling. Another hour passed. Veilstrom's patience, considerable though it was, began to fray. He was preparing to send guards to her quarters when a stir rippled through the crowd near the entrance. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. Lady Seraphine had arrived. She moved through the parting crowd with her usual grace, but something was wrong. Veilstrom's sharp eyes catalogued the details immediately. Her gown, while elegant, had been chosen and donned hastily. The deep burgundy fabric hung slightly askew at the shoulders, and her hair, normally arranged in elaborate braids, had been pulled back in a simple style that spoke of time constraints rather than preference. More tellingly, she was pale. Her naturally ivory complexion had gone nearly translucent, and there was a tightness around her eyes that suggested either pain or exhaustion. She approached the dais where Veilstrom stood and executed a perfect curtsy despite whatever discomfort she was experiencing. "My lord, I apologize for my tardiness." Her voice was steady, controlled. Of course it was. Seraphine would sooner cut out her own tongue than show weakness in front of the assembled court. The nobles watched with undisguised interest, eager to see how their lord would respond to this breach of protocol. Veilstrom gestured to a side chamber visible through an archway. "A word, now." He did not wait for her acknowledgement, simply turned and walked toward the indicated room. Behind him, he heard Seraphine's footsteps following at the appropriate distance. The whispers of the court swelled in their wake, but the heavy door cut them off as it swung shut. The room was a private study he used for consultations during events like these. Shelves lined with ancient texts covered one wall, while a large desk dominated the center. Veilstrom turned to face Seraphine, his expression cold. 2 hours, he said quietly. "You are 2 hours late to an event where I specifically requested your early attendance. This is not like you, Seraphine. Explain." She met his gaze steadily, though he noticed she kept her hands clasped in front of her. "I was delayed by unexpected circumstances, my lord. It won't happen again." "Unexpected circumstances," he repeated. "That is what you offer me. After 2 centuries of service, you think I will accept such a vague excuse?" A muscle in her jaw tightened. "I mean no disrespect. I simply prefer not to elaborate." Veilstrom's eyes narrowed. Seraphine was many things, but evasive was not typically among them. When she made mistakes, she owned them. When she had concerns, she voiced them. This reticence was entirely out of character. He stepped closer, studying her with the intensity he usually reserved for battle plans. That was when he noticed the smell, faint but distinct beneath her perfume. Blood. Not fresh enough to suggest a recent wound, but present nonetheless. And there, just visible at the edge of her right sleeve, a trace of white fabric that did not match her gown. Bandages. His voice dropped to a register that made hardened warriors nervous. "What happened to your arm?" "Nothing of consequence." Her reply came too quickly. "Show me." "My lord, I assure you." That was not a request, Lady Seraphine. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Veilstrom watched calculations flicker behind her dark eyes. She was weighing options, considering angles, trying to find a way to deflect or delay. But they both knew how this would end. He had given an order. In his domain, his word was absolute. Finally, slowly, she raised her hands to the fastenings of her right sleeve. The gown had been designed with decorative clasps running from shoulder to wrist, allowing the sleeve to be removed for warm weather. Her fingers trembled slightly as she worked them open. The sleeve fell away, revealing her arm from shoulder to fingertips. Bandages wrapped around her forearm in neat layers, pristine white against her pale skin. But blood had seeped through in several places, creating dark patches that spoke of wounds beneath. Veilstrom's expression remained carefully neutral, though something cold and dangerous stirred in his chest. The other arm. Seraphine hesitated for only a fraction of a second before complying. The left sleeve came away to reveal similar bandaging, similarly bloodstained. Whatever had happened, it had been severe enough to require extensive treatment on both arms. "Who did this?" His voice was soft, which anyone who knew him would recognize as infinitely more threatening than shouting. "My lord, please. It has been handled." "Who did this?" Seraphine looked away, her jaw set in stubborn silence. Veilstrom recognized that expression. She had worn it exactly twice before in all their years together, both times when she had decided that protecting him from information was more important than following his direct orders. He did not appreciate it then. He appreciated it even less now. "You will tell me," he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that preceded violence. "Or I will summon the royal physician and have him examine you while I question every person in this castle until I have answers. I imagine that would be far more humiliating than simply speaking plainly." Her eyes snapped back to his, a flash of defiant anger breaking through her composure. Good. He preferred her angry to whatever this careful blankness was. "It was my own fault," she said finally. "I was careless during a training exercise. The weapons master warned me about overextending, but I ignored him. This is the consequence of my own arrogance, nothing more." Veilstrom studied her face. She was lying, though the lie was expertly constructed. Seraphine was indeed known for pushing herself hard during combat training, and she did occasionally sustain minor injuries. The explanation was plausible enough that most would accept it without question. But he was not most people, and he knew her better than anyone else in this realm. "Show me the wounds." "My lord." "The bandages, Seraphine, remove them." This time her hesitation lasted longer. He watched her internal struggle play out across features she could not quite keep neutral. Fear flickered there, quickly suppressed. Not fear of him, he noted, but of what revealing the wounds would mean. With movements that spoke of resignation, she began unwinding the bandages from her right arm. The fabric fell away in layers, each one progressively more stained than the last. When the final strip came loose, Veilstrom's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The wounds were burns. Not the clean burns of training accidents or even combat magic. These were deliberate, patterned. Circular marks, evenly spaced along her forearm, each roughly the size of a coin. The kind of injuries created by pressing heated metal against flesh and holding it there while the victim suffered. Torture marks. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees as Veilstrom's power leaked out unchecked. Frost began forming on the windows. The candles flickering in their sconces burned lower, their flames turning blue at the edges. "Who?" The word came out barely above a whisper. Seraphine quickly began rewrapping the bandages, her movements jerky and unpracticed. She was trying to hide the evidence, to minimize what he had seen. "I told you, it was a training accident. The weapons master uses heated." "Do not." Veilstrom's hand shot out, catching her wrist with enough force to stop her movements, but not enough to cause additional pain. "Do not insult my intelligence by continuing this fiction. Those are torture burns, systematic, deliberately placed to cause maximum pain while avoiding permanent damage to muscle or bone. Someone hurt you, and they did so with the intent to extract information or exact punishment." He released her wrist and stepped back, his mind already racing through possibilities. Who would dare harm his chief advisor? Who would be foolish enough to think such an action would go unpunished? The list of individuals with both motive and opportunity was distressingly long. Demon politics thrived on such machinations. "It has been handled," Seraphine said again, her voice strained. She had finished rewrapping the bandages with hands that shook slightly. "I ask that you let it rest." "Handled how?" "The matter is resolved. That is all you need to know." Veilstrom laughed, a sound without humor. "You continue to give me orders while standing in my private study, injured because someone in my domain decided you were a suitable target for torture. Your audacity remains impressive, if profoundly misplaced." He moved to the door and opened it slightly, gesturing to a servant who waited in the hallway outside. "Summon Captain Drex, immediately." "My lord, please." Seraphine took a step forward, then stopped as pain clearly lanced through her arms. She masked the reaction quickly, but not quickly enough. "Sit down," Veilstrom commanded, pointing to a chair near the desk. Before you fall down." For once, she obeyed without argument, lowering herself carefully into the indicated seat. Veilstrom noted how she kept her arms still, preventing the fabric of her gown from brushing against the bandages. The burns had to be excruciating, yet she had dressed, traveled to the castle, and walked through a crowded ballroom without showing any outward sign of distress. The level of control that required was extraordinary. It was also completely unnecessary, which meant she had been motivated by something beyond mere duty. Captain Drex arrived within minutes, his massive form filling the doorway. The orc had served as head of Veilstrom's personal guard for 50 years, earning his position through a combination of absolute loyalty and tactical brilliance. His scarred face took in the scene with a single glance, missing nothing. "My lord, Lady Seraphine has been injured. I want to know how, when, and by whom. Start with her household staff and work outward. Anyone who saw her today, anyone who might have information. Bring them to me." Drex nodded sharply and turned to go, but Seraphine's voice stopped him. "Captain, I must insist this is unnecessary. I have already dealt with the situation." The orc looked to Veilstrom, who gestured for him to proceed. Drex disappeared into the hallway, already barking orders to his subordinates. Silence settled over the study. Through the door, muffled by distance and stone, the sounds of the ball continued. Music played. Guests laughed and danced and plotted their petty schemes. The normal rhythm of court life went on, oblivious to the fury building in their lord. "You should return to the celebration," Seraphine said quietly. "Your absence will be noted. People will talk." "Let them talk." Veilstrom moved to a cabinet along the wall and extracted a bottle of wine, the good vintage he kept for rare occasions. He poured 2 glasses and brought one to Seraphine. "Drink. It will help with the pain." She accepted the glass but did not drink immediately. Instead, she stared into the dark liquid as though it might contain answers to questions she had not asked. "Why?" Veilstrom asked, settling into the chair behind his desk. "Why hide this from me?" "Because I knew how you would react." "And how is that exactly?" She finally looked up, meeting his eyes. "Like this, with rage barely contained, ready to tear apart whoever is responsible. Ready to turn the entire realm upside down, seeking vengeance for an attack on someone you consider under your protection." "You say that as though it would be unreasonable." "I say it because it is exactly what I would do in your position, which means it is predictable, and predictable responses can be exploited." She set the untouched wine on the desk. "Someone wanted you to react this way. That is why they targeted me specifically." Veilstrom considered this. It made tactical sense, which meant Seraphine had been analyzing the situation even while enduring torture. Typical of her to maintain that level of strategic thinking regardless of personal circumstances. "Walk me through it," he said. She shifted in the chair, trying to find a position that did not aggravate her injuries. "3 nights ago, I received a message requesting a meeting. It was signed with a seal I recognized, someone we have worked with on border negotiations. The meeting place was a warehouse in the merchant district, neutral ground." "You went alone." "The message specified I should come alone. That was my first mistake," she grimaced. "When I arrived, there were 4 of them waiting. Demon nobles, though I did not recognize them immediately. They wore masks." "But you recognized them eventually." "Yes, once they started asking questions, certain speech patterns became apparent. They wanted information about troop movements along the eastern border. Specifically, they wanted to know about the new fortifications you ordered constructed near the Shadowpine Pass." Veilstrom's eyes narrowed. Those fortifications were classified information, known only to himself, Seraphine, and the generals commanding the Eastern Legions. If someone was actively seeking intelligence about them, it suggested a planned assault or invasion. "You told them nothing." Of course not. Pride flickered across her features. They had clearly expected me to cooperate once threatened. When I refused, they decided to make their point more forcefully. She gestured to her bandaged arms. They had prepared quite thoroughly. The heated brands, various implements. One of them had clearly studied torture techniques. He knew exactly where to burn to cause maximum pain without doing lasting damage. The casual way she described her own torture made Veilstrom's blood run cold. How long? Several hours. I lost consciousness twice. When I woke the second time, they were gone. Someone had carried me to a healing house in the lower city and left payment for my treatment. They let you go. Yes, which troubled me more than the torture itself. Why go to such lengths to extract information, then simply release me when they failed? It made no tactical sense unless... She paused, working through the logic even as she spoke. Unless extracting information was never the real goal. Veilstrom nodded slowly. He had already reached the same conclusion. They wanted to provoke a response. They hurt you knowing I would learn of it eventually, knowing I would seek vengeance. The question is why they want that response and how they plan to use it. Exactly. Which is why I chose to handle this quietly. I have my own people investigating the masked nobles' identities. Once I know who they serve, we can determine their larger plan and counter it appropriately. It was a sound strategy, one Veilstrom himself might have employed under different circumstances. Seraphine had correctly identified the political trap being set and taken steps to avoid it. But she had also endured hours of torture and then attempted to conceal it from him, which suggested a profound misunderstanding of their relationship. Veilstrom rose from his chair and moved to the window. Beyond the glass, his domain stretched out in shadow and starlight. Cities built over millennia, armies forged through centuries of conquest, power structures maintained through careful balance of fear and respect. All of it rested on a foundation of absolute authority. When he made a decree, it was followed. When he offered protection, it was absolute. And when someone under his protection was harmed, the response was swift and terrible. These were not merely the trappings of power. They were the essence of what made his rule stable. The moment he showed weakness, the moment he allowed an attack on his people to go unanswered, the entire structure would begin to fracture. Seraphine understood politics as well as anyone. She had to know this. Yet she had still chosen to hide her injuries, to handle the matter privately, to risk everything on her own investigation. The question was why. "You think I would act rashly," he said, still facing the window. "You think that learning of this attack would drive me to immediate, violent retaliation that would play into our enemy's hands." "I think," Seraphine said carefully, "that your first instinct would be to protect those you value. That instinct, while admirable, can be exploited by those who understand it. And yet here we are. I know of the attack. I am, as you predicted, quite ready to tear apart whoever is responsible. But I have not ordered immediate retaliation. I have not dispatched armies or called for executions. Instead, I am sitting in my private study, having a conversation." He turned to face her. "Perhaps you underestimate my capacity for restraint. Or perhaps you are demonstrating precisely why I have always valued serving at your side." A faint smile crossed her features. "You lead with strength, but you are not ruled by it. That is a rare quality, my lord." Before Veilstrom could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Captain Drex entered, followed by 2 guards escorting a young demon woman in servant's livery. She looked terrified, her eyes darting between Veilstrom and Seraphine. "This is Myra," Drex announced. "She serves in Lady Seraphine's household. She has information." The girl dropped to her knees immediately. "My lord, please. I did not know what else to do. She told me not to tell anyone, but the captain said." "Myra," Seraphine's voice cut through the panic. "It is all right. You may speak freely." The servant looked up at her lady, eyes brimming with tears. "I found you that morning, my lady. When you did not wake at your usual hour, I came to check on you, and you were there in your bed, barely conscious, bleeding through the bandages. You made me promise not to tell anyone. You said it was important, that lives depended on it. But I have been so frightened." "You did exactly right," Seraphine assured her. "Both in keeping your promise and in speaking to the captain when commanded. I am not angry with you." Veilstrom gestured for the girl to stand. "Tell me what you saw that morning, every detail." Myra swallowed hard but complied. "The lady was pale as death, my lord. The bandages were rough work, clearly done in haste. I wanted to call for a physician, but she refused. She had me help her clean and redress the wounds instead. Then she slept for nearly 2 days." "2 days," Veilstrom repeated, his gaze shifting to Seraphine. "This happened 3 nights ago. You spent 2 days recovering, which means you have been conscious and mobile for less than 24 hours. Seraphine said nothing, but her silence was confirmation enough. "Did anyone visit Lady Seraphine during this time?" Veilstrom asked the servant. "No, my lord. She refused all visitors, said she was working on sensitive documents and could not be disturbed. The household staff were told she had taken ill and needed rest." "And today, what happened today?" "She woke this afternoon and asked for help dressing. She seemed—" Myra hesitated, searching for words. "Determined, my lord, like nothing would prevent her from attending the ball. I tried to suggest that perhaps staying home would be wiser, but she would not hear of it." Veilstrom dismissed the girl with instructions to remain available for further questioning. When the door closed behind her, he turned back to Seraphine with an expression that mixed anger and something that might have been concern. "Less than a full day since regaining consciousness, and you decided attending a ball was more important than continued rest." "It was not about the ball." Seraphine's hands tightened on the arms of her chair. "It was about not giving them the satisfaction of keeping me away. Someone tried to make me weak, tried to break me. I will not give them that victory." "So instead you torture yourself further by forcing your body to perform when it clearly needs more time to heal. Very logical." "I heal quickly. I would have been fine if not for the elaborate sleeve fastenings on this dress. They took longer than anticipated, which caused the delay in my arrival." Veilstrom moved closer, crouching down so his eyes were level with hers. "You are many things, Seraphine, brilliant, capable, insufferably stubborn. But you are not invincible, no matter how much you pretend otherwise." For a moment, her careful composure cracked. Pain and exhaustion showed through, along with something else. Shame, perhaps, or frustration at her own limitations. "I cannot afford to be weak," she said quietly. "Not in this court, not in my position. The moment I show vulnerability, someone will attempt to exploit it. You know this as well as I do." "The moment you showed vulnerability," Veilstrom gestured to her bandaged arms. "That moment has already passed. Someone in this realm decided you could be taken, hurt, used as a pawn in their schemes. They were wrong about your willingness to break, but they were right that you could be physically harmed. That weakness, as you call it, has already been demonstrated." He stood, beginning to pace. "The question now is not whether you appear strong or weak. It is how we respond to this attack in a way that serves our interests while avoiding whatever trap has been set. Which is why I tried to handle it quietly. And I appreciate the tactical thinking behind that decision. But you made one critical error in your calculations." "Which was?" "You assumed I would be unable to separate my personal reaction from political necessity. You assumed that learning of your torture would drive me to act against my own interests." He stopped pacing and looked at her directly. "You forgot that I have ruled this realm for 500 years not through blind rage, but through careful control of when and how I deploy power." Seraphine considered this. "You are right. That was a miscalculation on my part." "More than that, it was an insult." She blinked, genuine surprise crossing her features. An insult. You have stood at my side for 2 centuries. In that time, have I ever acted rashly? Have I ever allowed emotion to cloud strategic judgment? No, but have I ever failed to consider the larger implications of my actions before taking them? You have not, however. Then why, Veilstrom interrupted, did you assume this situation would be any different? Why did you believe that an attack on you specifically would transform me into someone who acts without thinking? The question hung in the air between them. Seraphine opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. For perhaps the first time since he had known her, she appeared genuinely at a loss for words. She paused, clearly working through the implications of what he was asking. I did not want to be the cause of political instability. If your enemies could provoke you through harming me, then I become a liability. Better to handle it privately than to create that vulnerability. And in doing so, you made decisions about my capacity for control without consulting me. You determined what I could and could not handle, what information I should or should not have access to. That is not your role, Seraphine. That has never been your role. I was trying to protect you. I do not need your protection. The words came out sharper than intended. Veilstrom took a breath, moderating his tone. I need your counsel, your strategic insight, your willingness to question my assumptions and present alternatives I might not have considered. But I do not need you to make decisions about what I can handle or to shield me from difficult information. Seraphine was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. I did not want to disappoint you. Disappoint me. You chose me for this position because I could handle the political complexities of court, because I could navigate dangerous situations and emerge with intelligence you needed. These nobles, whoever they are, they captured me. They hurt me. They got closer to valuable information than anyone should have been able to. That represents a failure on my part. Understanding dawned. This was not about protecting him from making poor political decisions. This was about Seraphine's own pride, her perception of what she needed to be to maintain her position. Veilstrom pulled another chair close and sat down facing her. Let me be very clear about something. The reason I value your service is not because you are perfect or invulnerable. It is because you think clearly under pressure, because you consider angles others miss, and because you have never once lied to me to make yourself look better. He gestured to her arms. Until tonight. She flinched slightly. I never actually lied. I simply declined to provide complete information. A distinction that matters very little. You allowed me to believe everything was normal when in fact you had been tortured and were still recovering. You placed your own pride above my right to know what happens to my advisors. You are correct. I apologize, my lord. I do not want your apology. I want your trust. He leaned forward. You say you cannot afford to show weakness in this court. Perhaps that is true for most of these nobles, but it should not be true with me. If you cannot be honest about vulnerabilities and setbacks with the person you advise, then your counsel becomes worthless because it is based on incomplete information. Seraphine met his gaze, and for the first time since arriving at the ball, she let her careful mask slip completely. Exhaustion showed in the lines around her eyes. Pain tightened her features. But beneath that, there was something else. Relief, perhaps, at no longer having to maintain the pretense. You are right, she said. About all of it, I should have come to you immediately. I should have trusted that you would see the larger political game at play and respond accordingly. Instead, I let my own pride dictate my actions, and in doing so, I have made the situation more complicated than necessary. Honesty, finally. Veilstrom allowed himself a slight smile. That is what I have always valued about you, Seraphine. When you make a mistake, you acknowledge it. A trait I seem to have temporarily forgotten. She glanced down at her bandaged arms. The pain made it difficult to think clearly, That is an explanation, not an excuse. How bad is it, truly? The burns themselves will heal within another few days. The healer who treated me was skilled, but they were deep enough that there will likely be scars. Scars, permanent marks left by nobles who thought they could use his chief advisor as a tool for manipulation. The anger Veilstrom had been carefully controlling surged again, but this time he let it show. Ice crept across the floor from where he sat, spreading in fractal patterns. You said you had your own people investigating the identities of your attackers. What have they learned? Seraphine's expression shifted back to professional focus. 2 of the 4 have been identified. Baron Kelthros of the Southern Marches and Countess Virenia from the coastal territories. Both have ties to Duke Malphaz. Malphaz. The name came out like a curse. Of course. He has been pushing for more influence over Eastern border policy for years. When I refused to grant him control over the new fortifications, he must have decided to acquire the information through other means. That is my assessment as well. The questions they asked were very specific to troop movements and structural weaknesses. Someone with military knowledge had prepared them. Veilstrom stood and resumed pacing, his mind working through possibilities. If Malphaz is behind this, then the attack on you serves multiple purposes. First, to extract information he wants. Second, to provoke me into an overreaction that makes me appear unstable to other nobles. Third, to demonstrate that even my closest advisors can be touched, which undermines the perception of my protection. All of which are reasons why I wanted to handle this quietly. If we respond too aggressively, we risk appearing exactly as unstable as he wants. But if we do nothing, we show weakness. We allow an attack on a high-ranking member of my court to go unanswered, which invites further such attacks. He turned to face her. This is why I needed to know immediately. These decisions require both of our perspectives to navigate properly. Agreed. So what do we do? Before Veilstrom could answer, another knock sounded at the door. Captain Drex entered again, this time with an expression that suggested he bore significant news. My lord, we have located Baron Kelthros and Countess Virenia. They are both currently in attendance at the ball. Additionally, Duke Malphaz has been asking about your prolonged absence from the celebration. He seems quite interested in where you might be and who you might be with. Veilstrom exchanged a glance with Seraphine. He knows I have discovered something. He is testing to see how I will react. Which means he is likely watching the exits from this room, Seraphine added. Whatever we do next, he will see and interpret. Then we should give him something to see. Veilstrom moved to the door. Captain, please inform Duke Malphaz that I will be returning to the ball shortly and that I require his presence for an important announcement. Drex saluted and departed. Veilstrom turned back to Seraphine, who was watching him with a mixture of curiosity and concern. What are you planning? She asked. You said you did not want to be the cause of political instability. That you feared becoming a liability I would need to protect at cost to my position. Yes. Then we are going to demonstrate exactly why that fear is unfounded. But I need you to trust me and follow my lead without question. Can you do that? Seraphine studied his face, clearly trying to anticipate what he intended. After a moment, she nodded. Yes, though if this plan involves me dancing, I should warn you that my balance is not what it should be. No dancing, just standing beside me while I make a point that needs making. He offered her his arm. Can you manage that? She rose from the chair, moving carefully but steadily. When she took his arm, he felt the slight tremor that ran through her, the cost of maintaining composure while in pain. But her voice remained steady. I can manage. They walked together through the door and into the hallway leading back to the grand hall. Servants and guards quickly moved aside, their eyes widening at the sight of Lady Seraphine's bandaged arms. now clearly visible with her sleeves removed. Let them look, Veilstrom thought. Let them see and report to their various masters. Every eye in the castle would know about the injuries within the hour, and speculation would run wild. But by the time rumors spread, the official story would already be established. The crowd in the grand hall parted as they entered. Conversations died mid-sentence. The music faltered and stopped. Every eye in the room turned to watch as the demon lord escorted his injured advisor toward the throne dais. Duke Malphaz stood near the center of the room, his reptilian features arranged in an expression of surprised concern that did not reach his eyes. "My lord, I came as requested. Is something wrong?" "On the contrary, Duke, something is very right, and I wanted you present for this announcement." Veilstrom guided Seraphine to a position beside his throne, then turned to address the assembled nobles. "As many of you have no doubt noticed, Lady Seraphine arrived late to tonight's celebration. Some of you may have speculated about the reasons for her tardiness. Allow me to address those speculations directly." He gestured to Seraphine's bandaged arms. 3 nights ago, Lady Seraphine was attacked by individuals seeking classified military information about our eastern border defenses. They tortured her for several hours attempting to extract this intelligence. They failed, because Lady Seraphine possesses something our enemies clearly do not: loyalty. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Malphaz's expression remained neutral, but Veilstrom noted the slight tightening around his eyes. "Despite significant injuries," Veilstrom continued, "Lady Seraphine not only refused to compromise our security, she also spent the following days conducting her own investigation into who was responsible. Her dedication to protecting this realm, even while recovering from torture, demonstrates precisely why she holds her position at my side." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Now, I could respond to this attack with immediate and overwhelming force. I could order executions, seize properties, unleash the full weight of my power on everyone even remotely connected to this plot. That is certainly what some might expect." His gaze swept across the assembled nobles, lingering on Malphaz for just a fraction longer than the others. "But that would be a mistake. It would be exactly the kind of overreaction that turns political situations into catastrophes. Instead, I am going to do something different." Veilstrom moved to stand directly in front of the throne, his posture radiating authority. "I am announcing a full investigation into the attack on Lady Seraphine, to be conducted by Captain Drex and overseen by Lady Seraphine herself. This investigation will have my complete support and access to whatever resources are required. When it is complete, those responsible will be identified and dealt with according to law." He let that hang in the air for a moment. "Notice I said according to law, not according to my personal anger, not through summary execution or arbitrary punishment. According to the legal codes that govern this realm and apply equally to all, regardless of rank or title." More murmurs. This was not what anyone had expected. By invoking legal process rather than personal vengeance, Veilstrom had transformed the situation from an emotional response into a procedural matter. "Furthermore," he continued, "I am offering amnesty to anyone who comes forward voluntarily with information about this attack within the next 3 days. Those who cooperate fully will face reduced consequences. Those who continue to conceal information will be treated as accomplices to torture and treason." Duke Malphaz finally spoke up. "My lord, this is most wise. A measured response that shows both strength and judiciousness. I am certain whoever is responsible will be brought to justice swiftly." "I am certain of it as well, Duke. Which is why I want you to personally oversee the Eastern Territories during this investigation. You have expressed interest in that region for some time. Consider this an opportunity to demonstrate your administrative capabilities." The Duke's eyes widened slightly. Being sent to oversee the Eastern Territories meant being removed from court, from his power base and network of allies. It was exile dressed as promotion, and everyone in the room recognized it as such. "I am honored, my lord. When shall I depart?" "Tomorrow morning. Captain Drex will provide you with full details of your new responsibilities." Veilstrom smiled coldly. "I am sure you will find the position enlightening." He turned back to address the full assembly. "Now, I believe we have a celebration to continue. The musicians may resume playing." The music started again, hesitant at first, then gaining confidence. Nobles began moving, conversations restarting, though now every discussion would be about what had just transpired. Veilstrom guided Seraphine back to the private study, waiting until the door closed before speaking. "Malphaz will either flee tonight or come forward with information. Either way, we will have confirmation of his involvement. And if he flees, then he confesses his guilt to everyone and makes himself an exile. His lands and titles revert to the crown, and we dismantle his entire network without having to prove anything in court." Seraphine lowered herself back into the chair, exhaustion catching up to her now that the performance was over. "And if he comes forward, then he provides information about his co-conspirators in exchange for reduced punishment. We offer him a humiliating but survivable outcome, and we use what he tells us to root out the entire conspiracy." Veilstrom poured fresh wine and brought it to her. "Either way, we win." She accepted the glass this time and took a long drink. "You used me." "I used the situation. There is a difference. You put my injuries on display, in front of the entire court. I reframed them from a secret weakness into a public demonstration of loyalty and capability. By tomorrow morning, every noble in this realm will be talking about how Lady Seraphine endured torture rather than betray her lord. That is not a liability. That is an asset." Seraphine considered this. "You turned my attempted cover-up into propaganda. I turned your genuine loyalty into a story that serves our interests. That is the difference between reacting and responding. Reaction would have been executing everyone I suspected. Response is using the situation to strengthen your position while weakening our enemies." "Subtle," she managed a tired smile. "I should have expected nothing less." "You should have expected exactly this, which is why you should have come to me immediately. Together, we could have planned this response days ago. Instead, we had to improvise tonight." "Point taken." She set down the wine glass. "For what it is worth, I truly am sorry, not just for the tactical error, but for not trusting you to handle this appropriately." Veilstrom sat down across from her. "I understand why you did it. Pride, fear of appearing weak, desire to prove yourself capable of handling threats independently. These are not unreasonable motivations, but they cannot take precedence over honest communication." "They will not again." She looked at him directly. "You have my word." "Good, because I meant what I said out there. Your loyalty, your capability, your willingness to endure rather than betray trust. These are why you hold your position. Not because you are perfect or invulnerable, but because you are reliable in the ways that matter most." For a moment, something passed between them that went beyond lord and advisor. Recognition, perhaps, understanding. The acknowledgement that trust, once tested, had proven stronger than either had fully realized. "You should rest," Veilstrom said finally. "Actual rest, in your own quarters with proper medical attention. I will have the royal physician sent to examine your injuries and provide whatever treatment is needed. The ball will continue without us. I have made my point. Staying longer serves no purpose." He stood. "Captain Drex will escort you home and post guards outside your residence until this matter is fully resolved. You will not refuse this protection." "I will not," she agreed, too exhausted to argue. Veilstrom helped her to her feet, then surprised himself by adding, "And Seraphine, If anything like this happens again, if you are threatened or harmed or find yourself in any situation where you need support, you will come to me immediately, not when it is convenient, not after you have tried to handle it yourself. Immediately. Are we clear? She met his eyes and saw something there that made her nod without hesitation. We are clear, my lord. Good. He summoned Captain Drex, who arrived with 2 guards and a medic carrying supplies. As they prepared to escort Seraphine home, Veilstrom watched from the doorway of his study. The ball continued in the grand hall behind him. Tomorrow, investigations would begin in earnest. Malphaz would make his choice. The conspiracy would unravel or its members would scatter. All of it would require careful management and strategic planning. But tonight, his chief advisor would rest safely in her own home, with guards posted and injuries properly treated. She would recover. They would work together to dismantle whatever plot had targeted her, and the realm would be stronger for it. As the group disappeared down the hallway, Veilstrom allowed himself a slight smile. Seraphine had tried to protect him by hiding her injuries. Instead, she had given him the perfect opportunity to demonstrate to every noble in his court exactly what happened when someone harmed those under his protection. Not blind rage, not emotional overreaction, just careful, deliberate action that served both justice and political interest. 500 years of rule had taught him many things, but perhaps the most important was this. True strength was not about never showing vulnerability. It was about how you responded when vulnerability was exposed. Seraphine had shown her strength through endurance. He had shown his through controlled response. Together, they had turned an attack meant to destabilize his rule into a demonstration of why that rule remained absolute. The music from the grand hall swelled as Veilstrom finally returned to his guests. He had a celebration to finish and a duke to watch very, very carefully. Tomorrow would bring investigations and consequences. But tonight, he had made his point. In his realm, under his protection, loyalty was rewarded and betrayal was punished. Not through chaos or rage, but through the inexorable application of justice. It was, he reflected, exactly the kind of lesson that needed teaching every few decades. And this time, the lesson would be remembered for centuries to come.